So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this session of Sahaja Yoga and meditation. And I'm going to talk tonight in this occasional series about introspection and its value and its methods, or methods that we can perhaps use. Tonight, I want to talk about the shadow. That's the part of our personality which Jung and others call the shadow. It's a helpful concept, I think, but it's also a rather vague one, the way it's used. Some people use it one way to mean slightly different things from how other people use it. As I understand it, or anyway, as I want to use the term here tonight, when we talk about the shadow, we mean something like the part of our personality which is not open to view, the neglected part. The part which isn't easily apparent in our everyday conscious persona, either as far as others are concerned or as far as we are concerned ourselves. In fact, we may find it much harder than others to perceive our own shadow, unfortunately. But that's just because it's the part that we have neglected or have never been particularly aware of in the first place. I don't think this shadow should be seen as something necessarily negative. The shadow of a tree isn't negative as such, it's just a shadow. So my shadow isn't necessarily negative, nor is yours. It's not as though we show our nice side to the world, but keep our nasty side hidden, or reveal it only to our family. And that nasty side is the shadow, although it might be sometimes like that, I suppose. Certainly, though, there would seem to be a kind of charge, a kind of psychic electricity around this shadow, and an attraction as well as a repulsion, which makes it stand out from the rest of our personality. To give an example, I have a neighbor who's one of the most affable people imaginable. Bump into him in the street, and he'll chat away for hours if given the chance. It's not that he's a kind of needy person. He's very competent. He has a wife and child, but he does like to talk. He's one of those linchpin of the community types. But the more you talk to him or let him talk to you, the more you perceive that he's got a shadow. If, for example, as happened to me once, you should mention the way the government handled the COVID outbreak, watch out. For all at once, that really friendly person becomes someone else. A steely tone comes into his voice. His eyes bulge a little. He sounds vindictive and irrational. His mind, which he clearly thinks is very sharp and possessed of all the facts, has in fact become overshadowed. It's become colored with emotion, irrationality. He's slipped into his shadow. He also has his blind spots. For instance, he has yet to discover, after many years, that I have absolutely no interest whatsoever in one of his chief topics of conversation, which is car mechanics. The glazed look that comes into my eyes, the way my feet try to move away from the spot, the way my gentlemanly politeness is so obviously being tested to the utmost. He simply doesn't notice these things. But here, I think, it's not so much a question of his shadow as of mine. I'm almost unnaturally not interested in the mechanics of things, and in particular of cars. It's not that his talk of the insides of cars makes me nervous exactly, though the thought of the insides of my own car, or at least when I had one, used to make me very unsettled, and the thought of what was going to happen when its MOT came round would sometimes have me worrying in the dark reaches of the night in a way that nothing else would. Though normally I'm quite logical, I could become very illogical on such occasions because it touched that area within me connected with the faculty of sensation, which I'll explain a bit in a minute, where my shadow mostly lies. Now, in order to consider the nature of the shadow in a more poetic and a hopefully illuminating way, I want to read you a fairy tale, one of my favorites, and then I'm going to present an analysis of it. This fairy tale is a Greek one from Naxos, and as far as I know, it was collected by its translator, R.M. Dawkins, who was responsible for some wonderful collections of Greek folk tales. This one is called The Boy Carried Away to the World Below. So it'll take me about a quarter of an hour to read it, and then I'll do a kind of analysis relating it to this idea of the shadow. Hopefully it will be useful. So, the boy carried away to the world below. There was once a boy who lost his mother. Also, he was an only child, but for making good progress, there was no one to match him. Every year he would come out after the examinations with a face of better cheer than all the others, and always he would carry off the prize. All day he would sit at his books. They made him a room to himself, and there he would go to the window and sit reading all day. Opposite was the king's palace, and the princess found her pleasure day and night in sitting with her lamp, reading. This was not for a week or two, but all the time. One day the princess called out to her nurse, "Come here and look. Don't you love to see that poor boy who never fails to have a book in his hands? And I too watch him all day. May it be a joy to him and a grief never. Up then, go and call my mother." The nurse went off and called for the queen. She came and looked at the boy and said, "May all this be to him a joy." So the queen was going continually to look at the boy as he sat there every day with the book in his hand. After a day or two, the queen said to the king, everyone also was taking pleasure in the sight, "May joy befall the mother who has such a son. At his age, boys, all of them, go playing in the streets and at night are all over the place amusing themselves. But this boy is day and night deep in the study of his books." Then the princess found an opportunity and said, "I want him for my husband." "Very well, my daughter." The king sent and told the boy's father that he wanted him to come to the palace. The poor fellow at once thought that the king would have his head and that this was an order. Yet what could he do? He went up to the palace. The king said to him, "I want your son for my daughter's husband." When the poor fellow heard such a proposal, he said, "My son is but a poor man. What can I have to say about such a matter?" When he saw for sure that the king was saying this seriously, he went and fetched his son, and he and the princess were betrothed. All day the boy was in the palace. They dressed him in royal clothes. Also, they made things ready for the wedding. Now, the princess had with her not only the boy, but also a palace official, and this man was in love with her. Well, He grew jealous of the poor boy and went off to a wizard and prepared charms against the boy, so that he should be as dust scattered before the wind, nothing left of him. Then, on the day of the wedding, when all the priests had been sent for, the boy went aside for a moment. Then he couldn't find the way out. All he could find were some steps which led downwards. He went down them, and down, some 1,000 steps and more, and so he came to a great palace. He walked all over it, and through the door he came out into a garden. Then he found himself in a town, but he could not see any steps or anything else by which to go back. Meanwhile, the king was waiting for the boy, and so were the princess and the priests, thinking he would come out. Midday came, but nothing happened. They went to look for the boy, but he was nowhere at all. The wedding came to nothing, and the guests all went away. But what joy for the official, who now could marry the princess at once. But lo, she refused even to look at him, and for the boy who had disappeared in this way, she put on mourning, and in her grief would never go outside the palace. She made up her mind to remain forever unmarried. Now, let us turn to look at the boy who was in that town walking about. It seemed to him a strange place. He was there for 5 or 6 days, and when he began to be hungry, he would buy something and eat it just as he was, standing up. He slept in the open field. When his money came to an end, and he saw clearly that it was his fate to remain there, he took a post with a merchant as a serving boy. In this way he could earn his bread and have somewhere to sleep. After 2 or 3 months, he met 3 wizards, and they said to him, "How is it that you are here?" The boy began his story from the beginning. "A princess wanted to marry me, and on the very day of the wedding, I went aside and could not find the door out. And then I went down some steps, and so I came here." "Oh, my lad, they worked some magic on you. Here where we are is the world below, and no chance that you can ever find your own land again. But now, since we are also wizards, we can little by little bring you in 3 years' time to a sight of your own country. Meanwhile, you must every morning take one of these powders." Every morning the boy took a powder, one by one, all the time becoming blacker and blacker. In 3 years' time, he had become a regular blackamoor. Then the wizards went to him where he was in the merchant's house and said, "Take this letter and go to the wizard, the one who in your own country worked that magic upon you." For they knew that magic had been worked upon the boy. "And when you are with him, give him this letter and say, 'Here is a letter from your friend so-and-so.' He will ask you where you have come from. 'Stop a while here with me,' he will say, but no, you must not stay with him at all. And here too are letters which you must give to the king, and you are to make him understand that you are a native of this land here, the world below, and that your father here in the world below has given you letters for you to take to him, in order that they may become acquainted with one another. You must say that you will be stopping for some few days, and that then you will go back to your father. Then you will be taken into the palace to stay. And look, here is this ointment. As you rub yourself with it, you will become as white as you were before." When the wizards had given him these instructions, they went away. Presently, when he had gone aside for a moment, he again could not find the door to go out, and again he saw a long flight of steps. He went up and up for 1,000 steps and more, and so he came out on a flat plain, all covered with trees and rivulets of water. Then he saw the sea with some 10 ships, all with their sails set. He went down to the shore, and there he saw a crowd of sailors, They said to him, "Sir, we have been waiting for you to carry you to your own country." He went into a ship, and the other ships set sail all in company. When they entered the harbour of the boy's own country, they hoisted their flags. Bam, boom, a salute of guns. The king, and this was the man in the house opposite to his, the man who was to have been his father-in-law, understood from this that some king had come to him. He sent men to the ships to welcome them. At once the boy disembarked and went to the palace and handed over his letters to the king, letters to say that the king of the blacks sent his greetings, and that the boy was the son of that king, and that in a few days he would be going away again. Then they stayed there in the palace. The people could hardly think what banquets and what ceremonies it would be fitting to offer him. In the evening, the boy went to the house of the wizard. He found him and gave him the letter, saying, "Take this letter, it is from your very dear friend, so-and-so." Then the wizard said, "Sit down here and tell me where he is. I have work to do and cannot stay." And so the boy went out of the house. Just as the wizard was opening the letter had magic in it. The roof of the house fell in and struck him down. The boy saw the house tumbling down. "And serve you right, you wizard," said he, and turned back to the palace. Then they had supper, and he lay down to sleep. In the morning, as he was washing himself out of the jug, he took off his ring and let it fall into the water. The serving women went to empty the jug in the kitchen, and the ring fell out into the sink. A serving maid picked it up. The girl next her said, "It was I emptied the jug, so the ring is mine." So they started quarreling, which of them should have it. The princess heard the dispute and ran up and said, "What is the matter here? We have found this ring here." The princess looked at it and recognized by the mark on it that it was her own ring, the ring she had given to her betrothed, the boy of whom there was then no sign or sight. Scattered he was like dust before the wind. She fell down in a faint. They sprinkled her with water and brought her to, and she asked where the ring had been found. "In the jug used by the blackamoor." How were they to know that the blackamoor was the very man who had been lost? Then at midday, at the table where many great persons had been invited to do honor to the young blackamoor, there was also the official who had been in love with the princess. The blackamoor was asked how he had come to have the ring. He began at once to tell them, exactly as if he had been narrating a story. Once upon a time there was a boy who knew his letters well, and opposite him there used to be a princess sitting. Because he was a boy of such promise, she had a leaning towards him. Then on the day of the wedding, there was another man in love with the princess, and this man was jealous. He went to a wizard, and a charm was laid upon the boy. This was that when the boy went aside, he could not find the door out, only a flight of steps, and by these he came down into the world below, and the princess was left all by herself. Now, if you people here knew who it was who worked this magic on the boy, what would you do to him? The official was right there in front of him, and when he heard these words, his heart began beating, tick, tick, like a watch from France. Everyone at the table answered, "If we knew the man at once, we would have him cut into little pieces for the dogs to devour him." At this, the blackamoor at once poured water into his plate and mixed up with it the ointment which the wizards had given him. And as he anointed himself, he seemed to them just as he had been before, white as white, neither taller nor shorter, the man just as they had known him. Then said he, "It was this official who worked the magic on me. The king gave his orders, and they cut him into little pieces. They threw the bits to the dogs. The princess threw off her black clothes of mourning and was married to the boy, and his father was invited to the palace to live there always. So he made the pair a wedding, and a very fine wedding too, all with rejoicings and fair diversions. So that's the story. Now, you might say, how can a fairy tale possibly help us understand something about human psychology? But it has long been recognized by some people that fairy tales contain a collective wisdom, that they express certain truths of the collective unconscious. Anyway, let's get on with the analysis and see what we find. So we have a boy who's very scholarly. While other boys of his age are playing in the streets and making a nuisance of themselves and getting up to goodness knows what, he sits studying his books to the admiration of the princess in the palace opposite, and her nurse and her mother, the queen, and presumably to the admiration of her father, the king, too, since he consents to her marriage to this poor but studious boy without putting any obstacles in the way. And this actually is a very rare thing in fairy tales, where fathers generally make it almost impossible for anyone to marry their daughters. Now, the setup here is worth considering. The boy is an only child who has lost his mother but lives with his father. So his side of it is entirely masculine. The feminine element is missing. On the girl's side, we have a mention of her nurse and the queen, so the emphasis is very much on the feminine, and the king just does what the women say. So we can say that neither side, boys and girls, is very balanced. The marriage of the boy and the girl should bring about a balance, but are they ready for it? The boy, good though he is distinctly one-sided. The girl is perhaps a little spoiled. She's a princess after all. She wants the boy, she can have him. But there is a piece of grit in the shell, and this is contributed by the jealous palace official who wants to marry her himself and is prepared to use magic to get his way. That is, of course, evil. He doesn't care about getting the princess by cheating, by sacrificing an innocent boy. And what kind of love is that? He's not interested in coming to terms with his own shadow. He simply projects it all onto the boy. So he goes to a wizard, an evil wizard, who works a strange magic on the boy, which is that when he steps aside, whatever exactly that means, he finds himself on a one-way journey to the world below. This world below features frequently in Greek tales. It's not the underworld as we understand it. It's not an afterlife, a place of the dead. It's more like an alternative universe where things have to be worked out. It's a place where one travels into the unconscious in order to sort something out in the conscious world. If anyone's read Murakami's novel, Killing Commendatore, the protagonist there has just such an out-of-the-world magical experience in order to achieve a rescue in this world, our world. Or we could think of Jung himself, who tried to work things out in his imagination, who kind of deliberately tried to go off into the unconscious, an adventure he charted in his Red Book, while at the same time, he was living his ordinary working life, his family life, in this everyday world. It's noteworthy that in our story, the other world, this world below, is below. The boy has to go a long way down, 1,000 steps or more, and not up to it. So it's like he's been too up in the air, in the cloud land of ideas. And now he has to go to come down to earth and lead a very different kind of life as a servant boy. But he adjusts to it, and we don't hear of any complaints. Then he meets 3 wizards who help him. It's interesting, I think, that there are 3 good wizards and 1 bad, because it would seem that the shadow has a lot to do with what is called the inferior function. The idea here is that we all have four functions or faculties: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. Sensation is obviously touching the world, being conscious, very conscious of the physical material world around us. So these are the four modes of conscious being: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. And they come in pairs of opposites. Thinking on the right side, feeling on the left, are opposites. Intuition and sensation, which are also on the left and right, respectively, but might be better thought of as being up and down, are also opposites. These are Jung's labels, but Blake had a very similar conception of human awareness. But we have four zoas, or living beings, or archetypes, as Jung would say, and they are within us, and though they are those of thinking, feeling, sensation, and imagination. So Blake uses the term imagination, but it's similar to intuition. The well-known Myers-Briggs personality test uses a similar basis. And Jung's idea is that in any given individual, one of these faculties or functions is dominant. The boy in our story is clearly a thinking type. That means that the opposite faculty, feeling, is the inferior function. In him, it's not very developed. When he's invited to the palace to marry the princess, he just seems to take it as something to be done. He doesn't seem to have any passion about it, or at least we're not told that, but we would be given a hint as to that if the story wanted us to know it. So it's on his feeling side that his shadow is. That's where the problem can grow. The other two faculties, intuition or imagination, and sensation, the sensation of the material world, are his auxiliary functions. They are quite well developed within him, though not as developed as his dominant thinking side. So the three helpful wizards are like his three helpful faculties: thinking, sensation, and intuition. The fourth wizard, the bad one, the original one, has been able to get at the boy because of the weakness of his feeling side. And the three helpful wizards show him a way to do the impossible, to get out of his situation in the world below. This involves his taking a powder that will turn his skin progressively darker. It's a very unusual motif. I've not come across this anywhere before in fairy tales. Ostensibly, this is so that he won't be recognized by his enemies when he's finally able to return after 3 years to the world above. But from our point of view, it is a way of saying that he has to explore and, to some extent, assimilate his shadow. So this is the idea that we have to become conscious of the undeveloped side of our being and somehow bring it into our conscious awareness. It's never going to be as powerful as our dominant faculty because we're not made that way. But if we're conscious of it, aware of ourselves in a more whole way, then we won't fall into the shadow so much. So he has to come to some sort of understanding of himself. This is the purpose of introspection, or one of its purposes. Blake makes a vital point, I think, when he says, men are admitted into heaven, not because they have curbed and governed their passions, or have no passions, but because they have cultivated their understandings. The fool shall not enter heaven, let him be ever so holy. Holiness is not the price of entrance into heaven. Amazing. Suggesting that we become holy after we're in heaven. Anyway, this is said in his A Vision of the Last Judgment. So our boy in the story has to understand himself better and cultivate his feeling faculty. We could also say that he's been too much of an introvert, sitting all day and night in his room with his books. He needs to become more extrovert, more collective. So after 3 years of taking the powders, he's become a regular blackamoor. He has assimilated his shadow. It's become open to view. It's not hidden anymore. At this point, the wizards appear again and give him various instructions. Suddenly, the boy steps aside for a moment, and once again, he can't find the way the way out. Now he goes up and up until he comes back to our everyday world. He's met by a crowd of sailors who take him back to his own country in a fleet of ships, 10 ships. Is the number 10 significant? It makes me think of the number of the guru, and it suggests that he has achieved a mastery over himself. He has integrated himself at last. Not perfectly, perhaps. We're not looking for perfection, but certainly he's achieved something. And the fact that he returns apparently as a king or the son of a king to his own country underscores this. Now, of course, the kind of analysis I'm trying to do here would be described by those of a scientific bent as just pseudo-scientific waffle. But then that kind of science, as it has come to be practiced, is based on the cusp of sensation and thinking. And it has very little to do with feeling and imagination, which is why Blake was so critical of it. That kind of dry, rationalistic, reductive scientific thinking. Anyway, the boy deals with the evil wizard whose house comes crashing down on him, an image of complete overthrow. And although the friendly wizards have worked this magic, the boy says, "And serve you right, you wizard," suggesting that he takes his responsibility for his part in this action. He's conscious of what is happening and why. And I feel this is important. It's the first time in the story we hear him assert himself. Then we have the motif of the ring being dropped into a jug and the princess recognizing it. This is quite a common motif in other fairy tales, so I won't go into it here. Next comes the exposition, where the boy tells his story and goes through an albedo, as alchemists would say. This is the whitening, when he uses the ointment and returns to his normal self. He has been purified by the whole psychological process he has undergone. Meanwhile, interestingly, the princess discards her black clothes of mourning, so she also has gone through a nigredo, the alchemical term, a blackening. This is the famous dark night of the soul, when one confronts the shadow within. The boy, the masculine, did it by going through an experience. The girl, the feminine, did it by turning away from experience. So the situation is transformed. As for the wicked palace official, he gets cut into bits and fed to the dogs. What does this mean? It's an image of complete fragmentation, whereas the boy and the girl have achieved integration, both in themselves and now with each other in an ongoing living process of becoming a true marriage. That's the hope, that the villain has been scattered like dust to the wind. So this is something I feel that throws light on the nature of the shadow and how to deal with it, I think. There is something uncomfortable, discomforting about the shadow inside us. It's dark there. We can't see it clearly. We feel instinctively that dangers lurk there and negativity likes darkness. When I was a child, I lived in a house with a garden that was quite wild and in places. One part, it wasn't very big, but there were sort of different areas, and some of it was quite overgrown. One part of it, overhung with conifers, I always called to myself the dark place. And I had very mixed feelings about it, kind of attraction to it and a sort of repulsion, almost a fear, yeah, a fear of it. I was quite a nervous child. the curious thing was that just at that point in our garden, it bordered the garden of another house. And while we were living there, 2 successive owners of that other house killed themselves. So there was some substance to my feeling that that was a dark place, rather too close for comfort to the subconscious. And it's the same within us. But I don't think the confrontation with the shadow has to be as shocking or painful a process as people often like to make out, usually when telling other people that they have to do it. Okay, to sum up, I've spoken a very long time. I know they're getting longer and longer, these talks, but I hope this has been useful. To sum up, introspection should be interesting and always done with that little pinch of salt. So I'll ask Priti to play a short extract from a talk of Sri Mataji's. This is a great talk about introspection, and then we'll have meditation.
This year we won't be having, I think, public programs in UK, because also there are certain circumstances. But whenever there is a circumstance which somehow or other changes our programs, we must immediately know that there is a purpose behind all that change, and we must immediately accept it with an open heart. That divine wants us to change. Supposing I'm going on a road and people say, "You are lost your way, mother." It's all right, I'm never lost because I'm with myself. But I had to go by that particular road is the point. I had to do it. And that's why I have supposed to be not on that road, and I have lost my way. If you have that kind of a understanding, and if you have that satisfaction in your heart, then you'll find life is worth much more than what you think it to be. Now, as it is, what was the reason I thought that we have decided to have public programs? This year, definitely, we could not have public programs. So the reason is that we have to consolidate. In the growth of a tree, which is a living tree, it happens that it moves in a particular direction up to a point till it has to change because there is no sun coming that side. Maybe there is no water levels arriving. So they start changing. In the same way, one has to understand that we are in the hands of the divine. And if some plans are changed, it is reflecting back on us, and we have to see why. And the why of it is that we have to consolidate. Consolidation of Sahajogis is very important. The first thing to consolidate yourself, you must do introspection. You must do introspection is to reflect the light within and see for yourself. What have you done so far in Sahaja Yoga? Where were you? How far you have gone, and how far you have to go? What is the thing that is lacking in you? You'll be surprised when you start seeing yourself in a very unbiased manner, not justifying yourself. Do not blaming any bhoots, or need not blame any badhas within you or somebody else. If you start yourself, what has gone wrong with you that you could not consolidate yourself properly, you'll be amazed that there has been problems still lingering on, which must be corrected. Now these problems you can see very clearly. In the light of the Spirit, you can see them very clearly that this has gone wrong with me. One of the most interesting things I have noticed is that Sahaja Yoga is all the time covered with some sort of a maya. And this maya is ignorance, complete ignorance sometimes partially. Now when you get into Sahaja Yoga, you get blessed. You get blessed, maybe your family gets blessed, your children get blessed, you get some sort of a blessing for your physical being, also for financial, you get jobs, you get money, you get something exceptional, which is really miraculous. Now people get very much lost in those achievements and start drifting, thinking that, oh, this is the blessing we have got now, we don't have to do anything anymore. That you have been rewarded sufficiently for whatever you have done so far. That's not so. It's just a sort of a support to you comes so that your faith should be fully established in Sahaja Yoga. And especially you should know me, what I am. But if you go on still drifting, then maybe some of these blessings may turn out to be curses. And you might feel that what a curse it has fallen upon us and how it has gone in the wrong way. For some people it takes time to get to the feel of the blessings. For example, mostly according to the modern ideas, we think that to get more money is the biggest blessing. So many get that also. But actually it is not. To get your peace within, to get to your witness state, and to feel your vibrations all right, and to be in the center all the time ascending is the real blessing. Because with that you get everything else. The completion is only possible when you have the complete joy bubbling within yourself. Afterward, everything is just a means to achieve joy, to feel the joy. It is not the end. If it was, those people who have money, those people have good health, those people who have all the success so-called with them, they should have been happy and peaceful.
So we put our attention now to ourselves in meditation. And we just...
But they are not. They are suffering. They are suffering.
And we just empty ourselves, surrender ourselves this beautiful process of Sahaja Yoga, the Kundalini connecting us with the Absolute, which so gently, with such delicacy, works out all our angularities and knots and shadows. And we also pay attention in meditation to the indications of our Kundalini, of our mother, suggestions that we would be advised to do this, or we might try that, in order to rise higher. So, Jayshree Mataji, and I'll ask Priti to put beautiful music back on, and we've only got a few minutes left, and then we'll finish at around 9 o'clock. So, thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's talk and meditation, and see you again soon. Jai Shri Mataji.